It's difficult to understate the impact of Donald Trump's last 6 days, starting this past weekend with the capture of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro, then a push to purchase Greenland from Denmark, and now domestic upheaval after the killing of a Minneapolis woman during an immigration crackdown. Here to unpack what it means for a changing world, and more specifically for Canada, is our front bench. With me tonight, former BC Premier Christy Clark. She's a senior advisor with Bennett Jones. Marco Mendicino is former Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Mark Carney and a former Liberal cabinet minister. He's now a senior counsel and strategic advisor for Castles. CTV political analyst and former Conservative Industry Minister James Moore is with us tonight. He's now a policy advisor at Edelman. And Tony Clement served in senior roles in Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper's cabinet. He's now CEO of Tony Clement International. Hi, everybody. Good to see you tonight. I know that there's a lot of different stories there, and certainly probably the one out of Venezuela. We can have a discussion about the impact here in Canada in a moment. But as you put all of that together in the aggregate, James, what has been going through your mind? What is the key takeaway, do you think, from this week?
Well, and it's Thursday, and believe it or not, the week is still young, because right now, as we're talking, there's chaos unfolding in Iran as there's a pushback against the regime. And tomorrow, it looks like the U.S. Supreme Court may rule on Donald Trump's tariff policy. So the chaos is going to endure. I think the politics of this, on the one hand, for the Democratic Party is to try to find a way to not just be the anti-Trump party, but to show that there's calm and reason on the horizon in the midst of all this chaos. The two things that I take away, though, about the reaction to all of these events in the United States that I observe as a Canadian. One is that there seems to be no check or balance whatsoever on Donald Trump, not in the congressional side, not within the Republican Party, which is now just a MAGA party, not within his own administration. There was a little bit of a pushback today. Tom Tillis, a Republican from North Carolina, pushing back on Stephen Miller's comments that you showed just there. Some Republicans in the Senate, Josh Hawley, Murkowski, Collins, Senator Rand Paul, pushing back on Donald Trump's approach to Venezuela and foreign policy. There's a little bit of a line there. But the shooting in Minnesota then showed the second thing that I observe about American society right now is that there was an awful event that happened in Minnesota. And there's some debate, a little bit of a debate about what exactly happened there when that woman rolled forward with her truck. You would think that maybe half of Republicans and half of Democrats would see the story one way and the other. But unfortunately, politics, in spite of video evidence, if you support Donald Trump, you seem to believe that that woman was attacking the ICE agent. If you don't like Donald Trump, you seem to believe that that woman was murdered. That even politics, in the face of objective evidence that a woman was shot in cold blood in the streets of Minneapolis, that even people can have an objective opinion about a clear event that happened on video, that politics has to infect people's interpretation of an objective fact of which there's video evidence, which means that it's a really dark time, frankly, in America, that we can't have debates about obvious things in spite of video evidence without politics staining people's views of things. And that's a really dark thing to have to say out loud.
On the first point that James made, Christy, this idea that there is so little pushback to what Trump is doing, this week really seemed emblematic of that. And I think of all the things that he has said, for example, even where Greenland and Denmark are concerned, and how even at the top of the week I had guests on saying, oh, it's probably not going to happen, it's not too likely. Like, in your view, how literally should we be taking him at this moment in time?
Well, you can't take him anything but literally. I mean, he did invade, or they did go down to Venezuela and kidnap the leader. Now, he wasn't a legitimate leader. He'd stolen the election. He's a gangster. He's supported by the narcotics business. Not a terrible thing that Maduro's not in power anymore, but nonetheless, America has shown that it's not going to adhere to a rules-based order in the world anymore. And I think, for me, when I look at that, I think, okay, it's good that America wants to be involved in the world again. That's a plus. But it's not a good thing that America doesn't want to live up to any of the rules-based order. And so when you go from Venezuela to Greenland and you start thinking about, well, wait a minute, Denmark is a part of NATO. Denmark is one of our allies and an American ally. Is it possible that Greenland will be, I mean, if Venezuela is the 51st state now, is it possible that Greenland will become the 52nd state? So, I mean, Canada's sort of moving down the list of the next states that Donald Trump wants to claim, but it's not I don't think Canadians should be at all happy about the direction this is going in. We need to protect NATO at this moment in time, as much as we need to do anything else in terms of our international obligations to each other. And what has happened in Venezuela, I don't think bodes well for NATO and for for us supporting a world order that's going to make sure that we're able to prevent really, I think, really terrible events around the world. But I will just say this, it's true that Americans are divided. There's no doubt about it. But I think there is a big middle in the United States that is listening to things like Donald Trump talk about how, Rob Reiner, who's really going to miss him? He didn't like me. I think that's affected a lot of people's view of his character. And I think that the way that the Republicans are handling this situation in Minnesota with the ICE officer is, again, eating away at people's sense that Donald Trump is trying to always do the right thing. I think, yep, there's people on the right, people on the left you will never persuade. I'm coming to you from America today, and I can tell you, down here, there are a lot of people that just don't like what they're seeing. They're a big middle bunch of people. And when the midterms come up, and James has talked about this a number of times, I don't think that the Republicans are going to get what they hope out of that election.
Do you think that Trump cares about that, Marco?
Well, I certainly think he is paying very close attention to to everything that's going on. I just go back to your opening clips where you laid out the events of the last week. And, to that, James added Iran and the impending court decision around the IEEPA tariffs. And so if that wasn't enough, there's just a lot to unpack. And, as a Canadian, I think there are a few things that we can take away from the last week and Trump. And that is his administration is prepared to move fast, assertively, and with decisions that are very much coming from the center of that administration. And so in Canada, our contrast has to be to continue to be steady and to be composed, because so many of those events we cannot control, and we can rattle through them. But beginning with the agonizing events that have unfolded in Minnesota as a result of the killing of what seems to be an innocent woman, a mother of three. Just gut-wrenching. And the protests that are following. To the invasion and incursion resulting in the capture of Maduro, who is a bad man. Let's make no bones about it. This is a guy who's got an egregious track record when it comes to human rights violations, and I doubt very much anybody will shed a tear if they've got any compassion in their hearts for the victims of those transgressions. But what does it mean for Canada and for trade? And then moving to the statements and the rhetoric coming out of the Trump administration vis-a-vis Greenland and what that means for NATO. It's just overwhelming. It feels like we've just lived the final episode of Stranger Things, and we're living in the upside down. And what we want is some sense of serenity and logic and reason. And I have to say that, when I see the Prime Minister go abroad and, stand shoulder to shoulder with our allies and try to be a bit of a center of gravity to all of that, I think that's where the steadiness and the calmness has to be. And as Canadians, I think we have to really rally around each other and control what we can control. And that is going to be difficult in this year, but we've damn well better try.
Tony, I'll give you the last word on that.
Yes. First of all, the final episode of Stranger Things, Marco, was when the upside down disappeared. But anyway, other than that,
well, your analogy was great. That's my optimism.
But a lot to unpack here, Vashi, as everybody's been saying. Obviously, we saw near the end of last year the publishing of the strategy, the strategic paper of the Trump administration. Out of that came what has been known as the Don Roe Doctrine, like the Monroe Doctrine, but now it's Donald Trump. And obviously, the United States is saying this hemisphere, we're going to be taking charge in this hemisphere. So we're seeing some of the results of that for sure. On Venezuela, can I just make this point? Because if this was George W. Bush or Bill Clinton or somebody like that, they would have gone in and taken out Maduro, like they did with Noriega in Panama decades ago, and then they would have done regime change, right, to get the democratically elected. Trump didn't do that, and at first I was quite worried about that. But let me just flip this over to the upside down, Marco, and say, you know what? That didn't work in Iraq. Didn't work in Afghanistan, hasn't really worked for the United States to do wholesale regime change. Maybe it is better for the time being to decapitate Maduro, keep that government in charge for the time being, have a more languid and slower transition to democracy, which is what I think we all want, but not do it like in 24 hours, which is what the United States has been doing for the last few decades. Maybe this is better for Venezuela and better for the world. Maybe Trump was showing restraint in doing that. I'm just putting that out there. I guess the proof will be in the pudding. For Greenland, I share the concerns of the panel. I think that Trump, if given the opportunity, would gobble up the real estate as a real estate mogul would do. But there's other contending forces that are in play that are not in play in Venezuela or elsewhere, and that has to do with NATO and the NATO countries standing up for a sovereign nation like Denmark. So things are complicated for Trump. I know the general feeling is he can do whatever he wants. I'm not sure he can do whatever he wants. And last time I was in the United States was in Washington in December. There were a number of Republican congressmen who spoke at a conference I was at. They were all saying things that Donald Trump would not want to hear about the importance of NATO, the importance of allies. These are Republican congressmen. Now, hopefully they've got the guts to say that a little bit more loudly rather than at an international conference. But those people still exist.